If you leave a pressure cooker on a high stove and block the steam from escaping, it eventually explodes. It's simple physics. In 1914, the continent of Europe was exactly like this. The first source of heat under that pot was a race for resources. As European nations built more factories and embraced early capitalism, they desperately needed cheap raw materials to keep their industries running. To get those materials, they raced to claim territories across Africa and Asia. They treated entire continents as personal property, focused on conquering the land and extracting its wealth. The immense wealth pulled from these overseas colonies made European empires rich, but it also made them jealous. They constantly watched their neighbors, terrified someone else was getting a better deal, turning the heat up a little higher every year. This fierce competition wasn't contained to Europe either.
Over in Asia, Japan was rapidly adopting modern industry and building an aggressive, advanced military of its own. This world map shows the massive global scale of these competing empires, controlling multiple continents. With borders stretched this far, rival armies constantly collided. A minor border dispute in Africa or the Middle East could instantly spark a crisis in Europe. This global expansion wired the planet together. It turned small, low-blow cantons into a global ticking time bomb. To protect their vast wealth, these empires fell into deep paranoia. This created the second source of heat, the alliance system. Europe effectively divided itself into two heavily armed rival gangs. The first gang was the Triple Alliance. This locked Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy into a strict mutual defense pact. On the other side stood the Triple Entente, an opposing pact made up of Britain, France, and Russia. The core rule of these secret alliances was simple and dangerous. If anyone attacks my ally, I am legally obligated to attack them. Now, throw in the third source of heat, extreme national pride. Every one of these empires operated with a massive ego, firmly believing their culture and military were untouchable. You can see this aggression in Germany's leader, Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II. He ordered a rapid expansion of the German Navy, purely to threaten Britain's traditional control of the oceans. The continent was now neatly divided into two massive camps, armed to the teeth, tangled in secret promises, and blinded by ego. All they needed was a single excuse to fight. On June 28, 1914, they got their excuse. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the man in line to rule the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was assassinated in Bosnia by a Serbian nationalist. Austria blamed Serbia and declared war. Russia stepped in to protect Serbia. Germany jumped in to back Austria. Because of the strict rules of the gang system, nobody could back down. Within days, almost every major power in Europe was dragged into the fight. The lid blew off the pressure cooker. The fighting that followed was truly brutal. Millions of men found themselves trapped in freezing, muddy trenches, fighting for years to gain just a few miles of ground. By 1917, the strain at home became unbearable. Millions had died in battle, and back in the cities, families were starving as food supplies vanished. This domestic agony drove the people to march against their absolute ruler, the Tsar, sparking a revolution that forced Russia to abandon the war. But as Russia collapsed, the United States joined the fight. America brought a wave of fresh troops and supplies to the Allies, which finally broke the stalemate against the Central Powers. A local political assassination in Eastern Europe had swallowed millions of lives because an inescapable trap of alliances forced the entire world to participate. In November 1918, Germany finally surrendered, and the exhausted Allies declared victory. This document is the Treaty of Versailles, drawn up in 1919. Rather than building a lasting peace, the Allies used this treaty to punish Germany. They were forced to take total blame, pay massive financial penalties, and surrender valuable territory. Hoping to prevent a tragedy of this scale from happening again, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson pushed for the creation of the League of Nations, a group designed to settle disputes through talking instead of combat. But the League had a fatal flaw. It lacked actual authority and its own military force. If an aggressive country chose to ignore a ruling, the League was powerless to stop them. Ultimately, the Treaty of Versailles didn't fix the European pressure cooker. It bolted the lid down tighter over a pot of resentment, guaranteeing another explosion. By the time the dust finally settled, the political map was shattered. Ancient empires collapsed and broke apart into dozens of newly created nations, and the damage stretched far beyond Europe. Britain, for instance, forced India to supply money and send millions of soldiers to fight, causing severe economic distress back home in India. Yet this massive sacrifice had an unexpected result. Seeing the European empires weakened and exhausted woke up a new spirit in the colonies, inspiring the push for Indian independence. The First World War was the result of greed for resources, rigid gang mentalities, and blinding national ego. It tore the old world down and left behind a bitter landscape, primed for an even larger conflict.